in Bose, which is the institute of the WCC. So very briefly, I have a PowerPoint that I wish to share with you this evening, which will give us a glimpse of my work at the WCC. So when I speak about the WCC's work on interreligious dialogue, the program itself was started in 1971. Central Committee, which is a decision-making body which met at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, interestingly termed dialogue as an adventure of the churches. And when we started, the program itself was known as Dialogue with People of Living Faiths and Ideologies. But over the years, because of staffing issues, we thought that handling both faiths and ideology would be really difficult. And therefore, we could not do justice to the ideologies, to the engagement with the ideologies, which at that time was primarily focused on relating with Marxism, and it didn't work well. So when I speak about the work of the WCC, we have to understand the context in which this thrust towards interreligious dialogue started. And to a large extent, it was also related to the developments in the Catholic Church. And some of us may be familiar with the famous Second Vatican Council. And one of the important achievements of the Second Vatican Council is a declaration on the relation of the church to non-Christians, which is popularly known as Nostra Aetate, which means inner times, which was proclaimed by His Holiness Pope Paul VI in 1965. And what was significant about Nostra Aetate was, for the first time, the Catholic Church recognized that other religions provided answers to the unsolved riddles of human existence. And they said that in some ways they reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all. And it also went on to declare that the Catholic Church rejects nothing which is true and holy in these religions. At that time, this was a very revolutionary declaration to make a little bit controversial, but in some way or the other, it inspired churches across the globe to actively seek to engage with people of other faiths. And in some ways, the WCC also was influenced by the developments within the Catholic Church, and we have been working very closely with the Vatican over the years. And therefore, the WCC started its own program on interreligious dialogue. And in one of the important documents which were produced at the very beginning of the setting up of this program on interreligious dialogue and cooperation, and this document is called Dialogue in Community. The WCC recognized dialogue as a welcome way of fulfilling two important biblical commandments. The first was that we shall not bear false witness against our neighbors, which means that dialogue in some ways helps us not to disfigure the image of our neighbors of different faiths and ideologies by bearing false witness, by distorting, by not having a complete understanding or a fair understanding of other faiths, but passing judgments on what the other faiths are. But it also saw dialogue, that in dialogue, Christians actively respond to Jesus' command to love God and our neighbors as ourselves. So we saw the interreligious dialogue as an important way of fulfilling these two important commandments. So coming to the question of how we do dialogue at the World Council of Churches, there are two ways of describing the way in which we do dialogue. One is what is popularly called as the shoulder-to-shoulder dialogue, where we work with people of other faiths on projects for the common good, usually related to justice, peace, and the integrity of creation. And then we also have the face-to-face model of dialogue, where we engage with each other, with people of different faiths, in a way that acknowledges differences. It helps us to recognize that we are very different in our theological orientation, in the way we understand the divine, and therefore there are more differences than commonalities. And to have this understanding that we are different is an important starting point, because usually people say that we are all one, we all worship the same God, which is probably a trickling down, or not being honest to the integrity and the differences of each faith tradition. So this is how we do dialogue at the WCC, and as part of of the way in which we do dialogue, important for us is to strengthen relationship with people of different faiths. And this is just one model of what we might call a multilateral dialogue, where we engage with people, where we bring together people of different faiths together to reflect on issues of common concern. This is a picture. Our main dialogue partners, as far as the WCC is concerned at the moment, are the Buddhists. We've had a few dialogues with the Buddhists. We also have, and these are just a couple of pictures from our Christian Buddhist dialogue. And this is a consultation that we had in Yangon, in Myanmar a few years ago, where actually Dr. Joshua Raja was also involved in organizing. This was an Anglican Lutheran Buddhist dialogue, which was initiated by what was then called the Network for Interfaith Concerns in the Anglican Communion. So the focus of this dialogue was basically on peace building. We also have a long history of Christian-Jewish dialogue, and our main Jewish partner in our interreligious dialogue is what is called as IJKIC, the International Jewish Committee for Interreligious Consultations. So our last meeting, which took place in 2019, met under the theme, the normalization of hatred, challenges for Jews and Christians today. So we usually reflect on issues of contemporary relevance and concern for both communities. Our other main dialogue partners are the Hindus. So we had a Christian-Hindu dialogue, where again, which took place in Nepal, which for a long time was the only Hindu kingdom in the world. And this also had a focus on justice and peace. More recently, we also took up the issue. We also took up a project on scriptural reasoning, where Christians, Muslims, and Hindus came together to look at how hospitality is reflected in our own scriptural texts. And this took place in a place called Haridwar, which was one of the holiest places for the Hindus. Our other important Buddhist partners, or important interreligious partners, are the Muslims. And this is a picture from a high-profile dialogue which took place with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar in Egypt, who is probably the highest ranked Muslim cleric in the world, with whom Pope Francis also a few years ago signed a document on human fraternity. So the focus of this dialogue was on peace building. And we also have the previous picture that I showed was a dialogue with the Sunni Muslims, and this is a picture from Shia Muslims. And these are our partners from Iran. Our primary Shia partners are from Iran. So, and again, religion, peace, and violence was the theme, and this dialogue took place after the Paris and the Beirut attacks. But we have also tried to expand the ambit of our dialogue partners. And therefore, we have also initiated dialogue with the Confucians, which took place in Seoul. And alongside that, we also had a historic Christian-Sikh dialogue a couple of years ago in 2019 to commemorate the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak, the first Guru of the Sikhs. And on the basis of our links with the Vatican, we have also managed to have some links with the Taoists. Yeah, and usually the focus is on questions of ethics, which concerns day-to-day life. So the way in which we do dialogue, there is a distinctiveness to our methodology. What we have done is to be perceptive or attentive to the absences around the dialogue table. And this is because one of the persistent criticisms against interreligious dialogue is that it tends to be very elitist. It only involves religious leaders. And very often people have said that this is probably interreligious dialogue has been reduced to merely a photo opportunity of religious leaders who come together for something but don't do anything of concrete relevance to the world. So therefore, when we do dialogue, we make sure that it is not just religious leaders who are around the table, but also grassroots representatives of grassroots communities who are working concretely towards justice and peace. So we are always perceptive and attentive to the absences around the dialogue table. See who's missing. And Shanta Premavardhana, who used to be the previous director of the WCC's work on interreligious dialogue, he used to say this, and I quote from him. He says that to prevent dialogue from remaining elitist in its orientation and participation, there is a growing need to learn from the ongoing conversations among people who are in poor and oppressed communities, to which we who sit at ecumenical and interreligious dialogue tables do not have access. This has been really important for the way in which the WCC does its dialogue work. And for example, we usually see that women are often excluded from interreligious dialogue, but this is a beautiful picture of an event that we organized where we see a female Buddhist monk. We also see a Maori Anglican Christian from New Zealand. We also see a Shia Muslim woman from Bangladesh, and we see a Jewish woman from Israel, all captured in one picture. And I like this picture because it just shows the diversity of the participation that we have in our own dialogue tables, and especially the participation of women. So we also do work towards deepening the reflection, and also we work towards resourcing churches, because we are, after all, the World Council of Churches, and our primary membership and our primary constituency are member churches. So as part of our work, we have worked closely with the Vatican and the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue to develop several joint texts for reflection. And a few of our texts have been on education for peace. We've also, which was launched on the 21st of May, 2019. You can find this document on the internet. And before that, we also jointly launched a document on Christian witness, published a document on Christian witness in a multi-religious world, because we recognize that bearing witness to Christ is a part of Christian commitment. And therefore, dialogue and Christian witness need to go hand in hand. That mission is the heartbeat of the church. And therefore, we cannot miss this heartbeat of the church. Otherwise, we'll be a dead church if we don't have mission. We also have done some work on Christian self-understanding in a multi-religious world to help us to reflect on Christian doctrines like the Trinity, God, Son, and the Holy Spirit, Church, and the Bible in the light of other faith traditions. And we've also done some work to help people know the difference between intra-church, ecumenical dialogue, and interreligious dialogue. And very recently, just last year, we, in the light of the COVID-19 context, we had a document on serving a wounded world in interreligious solidarity, which was a call to reflection and action. And we were actually surprised by the responses that this document received, both in mainstream media. In fact, this Saturday, I'm going to be addressing a colloquium organized by the Church of Ireland and the Trinity College Dublin on this document, which looks at the question, who is our neighbor? We have also focused on the question of religion and violence, because we all know that religion and violence is religion, and the association of religion with violence is one of the biggest problems today across the world. And we cannot fail to address this question if you're being true to interreligious dialogue. So religion and violence has also been a focus. And we have also very recently looked at the question of multiple religious belonging, especially looking at how interfaith families, where people are married to somebody from a different faith tradition, and how children from these marriages, the pastoral challenges that confront people in mixed faith marriages, and also against the backdrop of people who claim to be spiritual but not religious, and who also claim that their spirituality is nurtured by more than one religious tradition. So we were looking at the theological questions and the mission-related questions and the pastoral challenges that this poses to the churches. We have also tried to relate dialogue to the question of liberation, because we believe that dialogue has to be for the sake of liberation of people from their various bondages in the present context. So we've had a few consultations, and very recently we also set up an interfaith officers network, where we try to bring together people working within the churches focusing on interreligious dialogue, so that there can be a support network and we can support each other with our work. But we also have training programs for youth. A couple of our training programs is what we call, one that we run in Switzerland called the Bose Interreligious Training Program for young people, because we believe that young people are the present strength of the church. And there is also another program that we have, which focuses on Asia, which is called the Youth in Asia Training for Religious Amity, where we try to bring young people from Asia and train them to seek friendship with people of other faiths and work alongside people of other faiths in their own contexts. And we've had several success stories from these young people who say that justice and peace are possible through interfaith dialogue. And we can speak about this more. We also have a journal which called Current Dialogue, which focuses on interreligious relations, which comes out once a year, which I also edit for the WCC. And we also have a wider engagement with real issues relating to day-to-day life. We work with secular partners, especially the UN-related bodies, on various themes. And two issues of focus, of course, has been respect for the other, but we have also looked at questions relating to economic and ecological justice, how different faiths can come together to promote ecological and economic justice. And very recently, it's good that we mentioned the question of Myanmar. We also looked at the question of religion and statelessness, as to how, as faiths, we can have some joint interreligious action which can address the issue of statelessness, which can put pressure on the UN and other bodies on developing interreligious action for statelessness. So we also have a peace building project in Kaduna, Nigeria, which is an area of a particular conflict. So this started because of a high-level visit by our former General Secretary and Prince Ghazi of Jordan. So we have this project which is run primarily by people, by Nigerian Christians and Muslims on the ground. And we have seen some progress, though we would like to see more development on the ground. So in conclusion, what we try to do is to balance both orthodoxy and orthopraxis, right faith and right action. And we continue to be challenged in our work by the African song and concept of Senzenina, which basically is asking what have we done and what can we do better. So I think I can stop at this point, and I'm happy to take questions. And sorry if I was a bit too long. and bit too fast.
Very interesting.
Well, it's a bit too long. There's so much to say and so much that you're doing. Brilliant.
Absolutely, it keeps us on our toes, keeps us busy.
Do you remember the Catholic advisor to Pope? He spoke to us one time on interfaith. I think one time, long back, to our group. And
Oh, really? Monsignor Indanil?
Yes, yes.
Monsignor Indanil.
He works with him very closely to be connected. And also, very interestingly, he works with Catholics and the Evangelical Network.
Mm-hmm.
And they have developed recently a joint document on certain issues of
Christian witness in a multi-religious world. It is about holding witness and dialogue together, which is a crucial thing, because sometimes we say that just talking to other religions means that it is a compromise of our Christian faith, whereas it is actually becoming more strong in our faith by bearing witness to Christ. Because we also know that in several parts of the world, religious freedom is a big issue, especially in Christian minority contexts, where we realize that people do not have the freedom to profess their Christian faith. And therefore, this document is crucial because it says that mission is something which is crucial to the identity and the very being of the church. The church exists by mission, right? As fire exists by burning. That's a quote. I think one of the bishops said that. I don't remember the name. The church exists by mission as fire exists by burning, and that's a very telling metaphor. And therefore, we cannot compromise on mission, and we should never think that just talking to other religions and seeking to work together means that we give up our Christian faith. And the WCC is clear about that. Sorry, I should stop talking really.
And Peniel is very powerful and influential, in many areas, and he could. I think it, as being a representative of the World Council of Churches, they have access to United Nations and the governments to say certain things. So he takes up really those issues to the people, and that's well appreciated. Please ask questions if you like to.
Yes, I've got a question. Going around the world, going around this country, when I see another Christian, the very first thing that always strikes me is that I see a smile. And yet we have, and I'm relating my question entirely to Christianity at the moment, and yet the Christian church is divided. So it seems to me that the laity smile at each other and the leadership rather growl at each other. Does the division in the Christian church stem from its leadership rather from its laity?
That's a really sharp question. Sorry, I only see Rosalind Scotcher as the name. I did not get
Richard. His name is Richard.
Richard. Yes. No, I think that is primarily the reason why the WCC exists, because its primary goal is the unity of the churches in prayer, in witness, and in service. And to just look at the fragmentation of the church is heartbreaking. I think it is actually. I would say that it is a travesty, the way in which we do not reflect the gospel, the truth of the gospel, and to not be able to proclaim that we are part of the one body of Christ is such a counter witness, if there is a term like that. And that is what we're trying to heal. And you're quite right. In many cases, Christians have killed each other. We know that, right? Christians kill each other, and therefore the WCC's efforts is that at one point in time, before the second coming at least, we will all be able to say with one voice that we and show through our actions that we are really part of the one body of Christ. And how that happens, because there are churches which don't take communion with each other. There are churches which don't recognize other churches as being equal churches in category and refuse to take communion. And that is really that is really, and this call that they all may be one as the Father and I are one, which is the basis on which the Church of South India, where I come from, is founded, has not been realized yet. And yes, but every little bit helps. I also, what you're saying is also quite right. At the level of grassroots lived reality, there is much more probably relationships. And also there are political, in some places, Christianity is the state religion, which brings in a whole different set of as a political dimension. It is not just pure religious dimension, but it also becomes a political dimension. For example, in Russia and places like that, where certain forms of Christianity or dominant religion, then it becomes a different set of challenges to people who do not belong to the state church. Yeah, so the challenge continues, and we need to learn from some of the examples, or positive examples across the world, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Your first two slides were really very interesting. I can't repeat them now because I can't remember them well enough, but they were an extremely good argument to balance the things that Christians tend to say and quote, "No one comes to the Father except through me." So how do we balance that up? And as I say, your first two slides are really brilliant in explaining that a bit, but can you go into that a bit further?
No, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I think the way in which we understand interreligious dialogue in the WCC is, did you think of, Dan, did you think of the two biblical references that I gave? Interreligious dialogue as being two ways of fulfilling the biblical commandment, one which is from the Decalogue, of not bearing false witness to our neighbor.
Yeah.
I think that is probably one of the challenges for many Christians, because we do not know the other religions sufficiently enough, but still it is not a question of saying that their truth is as valid as my truth, but just not saying that they're really bad without knowing anything about it.
Yeah.
Yes, which is basically we don't think of it in that way, but I see that it is actually bearing false witness against a neighbor without knowing somebody, just accusing them of either idol worship or aiding terrorism or something. It just comes naturally, and much of it is a subconscious bias triggered from many other things, not just by faith itself. And therefore, just to be aware and to seek to know the other person first at an interpersonal level helps. And the second is understanding dialogue as being a way of fulfilling Jesus' call to love our neighbors as ourselves. What does that mean? To love our neighbor as ourselves is also, I find that to be very effective, because it gives a really good Christian grounding to interreligious dialogue without complicating it too much. And also, we are clear, as has been pointed out, from a Christian witness document, it emerged from a context. It emerged in 2011, I think, the document that was mentioned, that we jointly produced with the Vatican and the World Evangelical Alliance, which basically means that we cover the most of Christianity across the globe, because it brings together three important constituencies and denominations. So to affirm together that witness is what we are all about, but in bearing witness, we do that with respect for the other, for our neighbor from other faith. So how are we sensitive in the way in which we share the gospel is as important, because it in some ways is reflective of the gospel that we believe in. Yeah, how can we claim to be Christians without being compassionately interreligious? And one of the terms that I often, something that I borrowed from my teacher that I often use is, the challenge for us is to be passionately Christian and compassionately interreligious. So how do we become passionate in our faith, in the gospel that we believe in and hold on to, but at the same time have a compassionate interreligious stand? So holding both these together is important. And we see this from the example of Jesus, the way in which he reached out to people who had different ethnic backgrounds, different religious backgrounds even, and the way in which he sought to engage. He did not shun the other person, did not refuse to engage with the other person, but engaged with them, he challenged them. And that is the point of dialogue, that we create an ethos where it becomes easy for me to challenge the other person, but do it with respect. It is not saying what you believe is right and what I believe is right. That's not what dialogue is. But to say, okay, I respect what you believe in, but can we have a discussion so that we fully understand what each other hold on to and still live together as human beings, because we believe as Christians that we are all created by God, our common creator, right? How does our basic humanity precede our differences?
The world would be a place, wouldn't it, if everyone was like that?
Yes, it
was brilliant, because I think it's quite a sticky point for a lot of people.
Yeah, I am reminded, Diana, of something that a Gambian theologian, a missiologist called Lamin Sane once said. He said, for many of us, pluralism can be a rock of stumbling, but for God, it is the cornerstone of universal design. It's a beautiful thing. For us as human beings, it can be, just diversity and pluralism can be a stumbling block to relate to one another. But when we think of pluralism and diversity as being part of God's foundation for universal design, as part of God's cornerstone for universal design, then it helps us to relate with other people in a different way. It helps us to. So I love that quote very much.
How do the people at grassroots level cope with seeing their leaders mixing like that? People perhaps who can't read and analyze it for themselves and who've grown up single-minded in one faith or another. Do they find that it's unsettled them from their belief? And how do you cope with that?
Thank you, Rosalind. I think we've seen a range of responses. Sometimes, as people, as Richard mentioned, sometimes the grassroots people are ahead of the leaders in the way in which they relate with people of other faiths. But at the same time, there are also some people who get very confused about what is the church doing. Because, and this is also because people, the way in which some people are brought up in the Christian faith is sometimes, it is almost as if we have an element of isolation from the other inbuilt into our faith formation, that we see ourselves as self-contained units, sufficient. And from my own Christian upbringing, I was brought up in a very very Christian family. I thought my grandparents and my parents were very good Christians, but in some way my Christianity had an inbuilt element of almost hostility towards somebody from the other faith.
Yeah.
The only way of relating to the other person was to convert the other person somehow. That's
right. That's what we grew up with.
And that was my only mission, to engage with the other person. And very often we realize that that is not the only way of being Christian. We grow into something else. And therefore I struggled with that question too. It got a bit confusing when you got into seminary, but and some people still have genuine questions about why the WCC as a Christian organization should be talking to people of other faiths at all. And that is a persistent question, and we have had a range of responses to this question.
But I think coming alongside is the answer, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, you said about the photo opportunity, that some people might just stand there in order to be seen to be doing it. In some ways, they've made that effort to be there, so there must have been something. I mean, they didn't refuse to come, so it was good maybe as well that they were there, even just for a photograph.
That's right. No, I think I need to put that comment in context, Kate, because sometimes what happens is these photo opportunities are really important, because even the picture of Pope John Paul II standing with other religious faith leaders had an impact on grassroots. They saw that the leader did not shun people of other faiths and was standing there. And these moments have their value. But what I am skeptical of is, having been in the game for quite some time, it's been 9 years, I realize that in some contexts, we find leaders coming, because interreligious dialogue, to be quite honest, is also lucrative, so to say. Because it puts you on a certain pedestal along world leaders. If you come from a particular religious tradition, some people have even monopolized the spaces there, so that they are the sole representatives of the faith tradition in all the dialogues which happens across the world. So my problem with such leaders is they are happy to be seen as interreligious proponents of interreligious dialogue. But when a real conflict is taking place in their own context, when people from their own communities are killing somebody from another community, they do not intervene. And then it's a problem. And you project yourself as a pioneer in interreligious dialogue and cooperation. And when people are fighting in the name of faith, your own people, your own followers, so to speak, you do not say something. And what does that say? That was the context in which I mentioned that. But definitely, I agree with you, because sometimes to just be there, is breaking a certain form of mental wall, right? Just to be seen with people of other faiths.
But we seem to be having trouble again in Northern Ireland, and that is, yes. Close, and they, I don't know, it's so difficult.
Yeah, very deep and stubborn thing, isn't it?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think, I hope we all enjoyed listening to.
Well, thank you for the opportunity for the conversation. I really enjoyed my time with you.
It's very interesting.
Such a lot to take in. Can't take it all in at once.
No, we need you to come again.
Yes, definitely.
And I think he is planning to become a vicar of a church. So
Whereabouts?
not yet decided. So we will see where you would.
But it won't be in England, presumably. I didn't know that.
I started. I did my curacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did my curacy in the Diocese of London when I was doing my PhD. So I started my ministry in the Diocese of London. So it might be good to come back to.
Oh, right.
Oh, that would be
That's
lovely.
where I started off.
That's where my father was when he was teaching.
Oh, really? Where was it, if I may?
Well, he was teaching a school, but it was in the East End of London.
Okay. In fact, I was in the Diocese of Stepney, if that makes any.
Ah, right. So, do you know St Saviour's Priory in Haggerston?
Oh, yes, of course.
Oh, well, his school was connected with St Saviour's Priory. They used to come in and teach in his school.
Okay. Yes.
So I remember. I mean, it was a fantastic place.
Yeah, good. I was thinking of putting this in public. Now I can't put because you are.
Now we found him out. The trouble is, we all have so many connections with so many other people. You only need to say one word, and somebody goes, "Ah." Oh, how brilliant! That would be lovely.
Wonderful. And I think we bring this to an end today. And thank you, Reverend Dr. Peniel, for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Enjoyed that.
Yeah, wonderful.
Have a blessed evening.
Yeah, shall we say the grace together? Peniel, of course, you.
Yes.
Do you speak some French?
Un petit peu.
No, and then you bless us in Tamil. Go on.
No. Okay, I can.
In blessing in Tamil, because his grandfather. I think, is it your grandfather or is
my uncle, my father's elder brother. was a bishop in the Church of South India, but he also used to be a chaplain to Bishop Leslie Newbegin. I don't know. Yeah. So, then he was the bishop in Madras. So, okay. Shall yeah, bow our heads for the blessing. நம் ஆண்டவராகிய இயேசு கிறிஸ்துவின் கிருபையும் பிதாவாகிய தேவனுடைய அன்பும் பரிசுத்தாவின் ஐக்கியமும் நம் அனைவரோடும் இன்றும் என்றும் சதா காலங்களிலும் இருப்பதாக. Amen.
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 Thank you.
It's just a traditional blessing.
Yeah. Grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. That's the prayer we did in Tamil. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. And you know, we look forward to see you again next week. God bless. And also in that tradition, Peniel, to be frank, you are in a very good tradition. We had John Bell, Reverend John Bell here.
Okay. Very good. Wow.
Yeah, from what is that singing group?
Iona community.
Huh?
Iona community.
Taise, from Taise, we had Father, you know, one of our friends. So lots of people in this, 2-3 archbishops. So you are in a very good tradition of speaking.
Okay.
Talk to us for a second about your music. What music are you doing?
Oh, yes.
No.
Do you sing?
I play a bit of the keyboard. Yes, but I basically after moving to Geneva, I haven't had the time. We used to compose some bhajans in India and play them, especially when I was in UTC in Bangalore, when I was a student. I used to play the harmonium.
Harmonium.
So that was it.
So did you write a bhajan and you remember? Come on, go
Yes.
on.
Yes. Sorry.
Any bhajan?
No, don't ask me to sing. You know, I'm bad at singing.
Come on,
You can
man.
sing.
Sing nicely.
No. You can sing. You are the singer.
You could sing together.
Go on. We will follow. We'll sing after you. You sing something that you wrote.
I have to be honest. I don't remember some of the bhajans that I wrote. So
Yeah, his wife is also a singer. She sings well, and she's also a theologian.
Yes, Rebecca, my wife, she sings. She's probably.
I think we'll let you go.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about the singing. Yes, thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right, cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you, Joshua,
Thank you
as
so
well.
much.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Joshua.
I love to see you all.
Yeah, nice to see you all.
Yep.